In this video, I will show you my 1 in 350 scale model of the German Battleship Scharnhorst. The plastic kit is by Dragon Models and the detail kit is by White Ensign Models. The Scharnhorst was commissioned in January 1939, and despite being the lead ship of her class, she was the second of the Scharnhorst class ships to be commissioned. However, the Scharnhorst was the first of the Scharnhorst class battleships to be launched. The Scharnhorst had a relatively light armament for a battleship or battlecruiser. It had 9 280mm guns. There were, however, plans to replace these guns with 6 380mm guns, which were comparable to those found in the Bismarck. The Scharnhorst's relatively light armament and high speed made it particularly suited to merchant raiding, and she participated in many operations to disrupt convoys in the North Atlantic. Ultimately, the Scharnhorst was sunk during the Battle of the North Cape in December of 1943. This is my second attempt at building a ship. This ship was built over 10 years ago now, but I think it has stood up quite well to time. There are a few things that I would change on it now, lessons learnt along the way, but in general, I think this is a good kit. The base kit is very good. The Dragon Models kit is quite a new model, so the detail is crisp and the parts fit well together. There's not a whole lot of need for additional detail on it, but a detail upgrade kit did bring in some additional details that are quite nice to have, stairs and better ladders and so on. One of the things that this detail kit was missing was photo etch or brass barrels for anti-aircraft guns, so they do look a bit clunky. And one other thing that I would like to have had on this ship would have been brass masts. They are quite tall masts, and the plastic parts that come with the kit are very thin, which means they bend very, very easily. And that made it quite a challenge when trying to rig the ship, even with Easyline. There's just unavoidable bending of the masts when you put on as much rigging as this ship had. The only thing that's a bit off about this kit, really, I think, is the painting guide. They have a lot of blue, which shouldn't actually really be blue, more of a blue-gray. So what you see on screen is probably too blue for what was actually in existence. And if I were to do this again, I would make it more of a gray tone, maybe a bit of a blue-gray. Another issue is that the painting guide shows the blast bags as being the same color as the camouflage where they are located. But in reality, they should probably be more of a cream / sort of beigey color. Unfortunately, on this ship, I stuck down the guns and the turrets, so it's not possible for me to easily get in and change the color of the blast bags. If I could think of a way of doing that which would result in a good outcome, I would definitely make that change, but I don't think it's possible. So it's one of those things I'll just have to leave. So other than those minor issues really with the painting guide and some parts that are a bit too delicate, nice detail but delicate, I don't think there are really any other issues with this kit. As I say, the parts fit well together and there's a lot of good detail on them. The Scharnhorst was the first ship that I airbrushed, so I hadn't quite worked out my masking technique yet. Masking could have been a bit better. If you do look quite closely at it, you can see there's some jagged edges and a bit of fading around some of the lines. It's not as crisp and as clean as it could have been, but I think it was a fair effort. Of course, as previously mentioned, this ship did teach me to check painting guides a bit more carefully because there's a tendency for them to be slightly wrong or have slight variations. It is one of the problems with building these ships, unless there's one of the very few ships that are still in existence today, which are mostly the American ones. It's quite difficult to know exactly what colors these camouflages should have in them. But if you spend some time searching around on the internet, you can typically find photos that give you a better idea of the colors that you should use compared to what is given to you in the painting guide. This was also the first ship that I had tried to rig with embroidery thread. That was quite a rabbit hole I went down over there. And unfortunately, being the first one, there were a number of things that I did to it that were irreversible. So that's why you see these kind of clumpy bits of thread at the top of the masts. That's where I eventually cut off the old embroidery thread to replace it with Easyline. But it did show me on this ship that embroidery thread was a possibility that could work, although it was difficult to work with. And then as you can see, all the way up until the Prince of Wales, I refined that technique, and by the time I got to the Prince of Wales, I got pretty good at it before moving over to Easyline, and then coming back and then redoing all the ships, including the Scharnhorst. The final thing that this kit showed me is that if you see a kit that has long, tall masts that are thin and plastic, you need to seriously consider replacing them with brass If you compare this ship to the Prince of Wales kit, that kit has brass masts in it. As you can see, they're beautifully straight. Whereas this kit, it is next to impossible to get everything to line up and to be nice and straight, especially when there's a lot of rigging on it. So that's one other change I would make with the ship. As I said before, brass masts, photo etch for anti-aircraft guns, or even if you can find brass barrels for anti-aircraft guns, that'd be even better. And then making the blue in the painting guide a little bit more gray and painting the blast bags in a beigey sort of color. And then I think this ship would be pretty much perfect. In the end though, I'm happy with this ship. I think it is a very good looking ship. Just the nature of the design that the Germans had here made a very nice looking ship. One other thing that I did find a bit disappointing with this ship was that it didn't come with any aircraft. I'd like to put some aircraft on the ship, at least one on the catapult. I think it's a nice little detail that really does add to the ship a bit. But in general, it's a very nice kit to build, good detail, easily fits together. And because the Scharnhorst is a smaller battleship with not so much superstructure, it's actually quite a good kit for a beginner to start on. This is one of those kits that I'd recommend people start with because the base kit is solid. It's a modern kit, so you're going to get a lot of detail baked right into it. And because it's not an overly complicated ship to build due to its relatively small size and smaller superstructure, I think it would be a good place for somebody to start if they wanted to get into building battleships in this scale. So that brings me to the end of this video. There are only 2 more ships left for me to do before you are caught up to speed on my backlog of ships that I built over time. And that'll be the North Carolina and Yamato. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers.